Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. On today's episode, Moshe and I are happy to be speaking with author and design leader Erin Weigel about her book, Design for Impact. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Hey, cool. Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Pleasure to have you. Hey, Moshe.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Erin. Welcome to the show, all the way from Europe, Amsterdam.
That is correct. I'm in Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
Very nice. Very nice. I love it. We have some European people recently on the show, so that's really nice. And just to add, the subtitle of the book is Your Guide to Designing Effective Product Experiments. So product is a key word over there for us, on
Absolutely.
Product for Product podcast. But first, tell us about yourself. How did you get to what you're doing today and to write the book?
Yeah, good question. It kind of was a book that needed to be written, I think. I'm not sure who said this. I think my therapist said it to me once, but I feel like it's a broader saying. And I think it's also highly applicable to product people. Like we build or we create the things that we needed that we did not have, right? And I remember when I was just a baby designer, like many moons ago, doing my first A/B test at a company called Booking.com here in Amsterdam. It was way different than anything that I'd ever done before. I'd run a couple of simple A/B tests using like Constant Contact and stuff at a much smaller company. But I was surrounded with data scientists and having to push my own code and seeing all kinds of data analytics stuff that I'd never seen before. And statistics scared the crap out of me at that point. So I guess I just started learning more about it. And eventually I started giving talks. I made the mistake. Well, I didn't make the mistake. My boss told me that I had to give some internal presentations at work. And I guess people liked them. So they kept making me do them. And then eventually somebody was like, oh, now you have to speak at this external conference. I was like, but I didn't even want to do the internal ones. And they're like, just do that talk that you already did. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And at one of the conferences that I was speaking at once, one of the questions that popped to the top of the like Slido questions, at the end of a Q&A session or whatever, was something along the lines of, what process do you follow to make product, UX experiments or whatever, to make product improvements? And I was like, ooh, that's I have a long answer. It's probably more of a book than like a 30-second blurb. And people started clapping. And I was like, oh, a book? It's like a book? I was like, maybe I'll try to come up with a checklist or something. So and it wasn't the first time somebody had said, could you write a book about this? So I just felt like it was time.
That's great. It's definitely resonated with me a lot, as a product person, not just because of the wording over there, but because it's really very aligned with experimentation and discovery that we do at product in general.
Yes.
And I mentioned a few times on the show before that many times I worked without designers, and I had to kind of learn all of it by myself and do it by myself. So lots of product people today are lucky that they do have designers, but
Yeah.
but on the other end,
I've had a little bit of both.
Yeah, but on the other end, there are still people that don't.
Yeah.
And also, there are some designers that think they are the center of the world, and they don't know how to work with product people sometimes. So I think it's a good thing also, for designers to understand, bring in the product person in there. It's also about the product.
Yeah, I remember when my publisher, his name is Lou, he asked me, who do you think this book is for, Erin? And I was like, I don't think there's any job title that I could say, because it could be a product person, it could be a designer, it could be a developer, it could be a marketer person, it could be a data scientist who wants to learn more about culture. I was like, it really is not about job titles at this point. It's about people who want to learn how to grow their businesses by making the best product and design decisions possible, and using the scientific method to help them do that. So I'm glad it resonated with you because I intentionally put that word product in there, because I really do believe that the best designers in the world have an excellent product and business sense. And the best product managers in the world, I think, not only have a keen analytical ability and business sense, but also a design and experience frame on how they create things. There's like a certain element of magic, I think, that happens in a good product that is kind of comes from design. And I used to be a product manager as well too. So
there's a lot of crossover.
Yes.
I always go back to the book, Design of Everyday Things, and there's like a phrase in there, like, we're all designers, whether you know it or not. Like,
bingo.
You're designing things in your life every day. And so whether you're a designer by trade or a product manager or an engineer, like you're designing things, your schedules and building things. And that's cool. There's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, the best definition I found of like what design actually is versus just people pushing pixels, in Figma across the screen or whatever, is design is the rendering of intent. Jared Spool said that, I don't know how many years ago, but it's really like intending to do something, having an outcome in mind, and adjusting things and creating things in a way that helps you achieve the intended outcome that you have. So I feel like, yep, fully agree. We are all designers. It's a way of looking at and interacting with the world.
And design, it's not just about visuals and stuff like that. I mean, even, and I'm sure this will resonate with you, Matt, now that you are senior product manager for APIs, there is also a design aspect over there of APIs and what works and what not and all that stuff.
Absolutely. A lot of systems thinking too. Like, how do these things connect to each other, and how do they talk to each other, and how do you want to transfer information between each other? And so thinking about systems and how they work. And I love diagrams as well, like coming up with flow charts and stuff like that. I'm very visual, and I think that's why I like design a lot as a PM. Just laying things out and saying, like, being very intentional in steps and journeys and saying, okay, like, how would a developer use and consume our API and those kind of things. I've been thinking a lot about that.
Like, what's their current mental model? What kind of information do they need to have? What kind of information do they probably already know that would be too basic? There's a lot of design, even in the most technical of products, for sure.
Yes. So let's talk about the process that you lay out in the book, and that's the core of the book. In the beginning, you talk a bit about, all the things, the why behind, going in through that, with some great examples and really cool images. And then you basically describe the conversion design process and the step in each one of them. And it's a really system thinking. It's a whole system. So let's talk little in highlight about that process. And then if you want, we will not have time to go over the entire process. You can just mention, the key areas briefly. But that's why people need to buy the book and read it, because it's really, the details are all the details are in the book, which is a really nice design book, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. That's why I went with my publisher, Lou, because I knew that they cared about the reading experience as well. So I wanted it to be, I don't know, I wanted there to be care. I wanted there to be care in the book. So
yeah. And just one little note before we dive into this, the book also have lots of humor in it. I remember one note over there about you talking with your dad in the book or something like that.
Probably, yeah. He often says, whenever there's a person around, there's a problem that's going to happen. I don't know. I've got so many dadisms. Yeah.
But then you kind of like tell him that if you read this or something like that. Yeah. So I really like the little quirky humor stuff in there, which it's probably coming from you. It shows your humor. So that's also very cool.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It was hard.
Okay, so let's dive into the process. Yes.
Yeah. Great. So you were saying that the conversion design process was something that I go over in depth in the first chapter of the book, which is totally true. And basically the way I was thinking about writing this book was like, if I wrote a thesis of what it was like to work at Booking.com, a wildly fast-growing, extremely profitable business, how did it become like the cash-generating machine and such a beloved product, because there were hundreds of millions of users every day? So I basically sat down and I thought about what is it that we're doing and how are we operating differently than most businesses. And one of the things that came to mind was the fact that we were always talking about a flywheel diagram. We had a chief product officer named David Wismans, and he would always show us a flywheel, which is basically like a reinforcing loop in systems thinking. And he would say, this is how our business operates. So it was really helpful to have a clear visual about all of the inputs and outputs and what is reinforcing and how and where what we were doing on a daily basis helped either improve or make the system worse. So I thought about if I could extract that or extrapolate that concept more broadly into business in general, what might that look like? And the product development process more in general. And that's how I came through to a system diagram with a reinforcing loop that shows that product design and development is not actually as linear as we tend to illustrate it as. So saying like, first you have to go through the discovery process, or I call it the understand phase. Then you have the hypothesis process, which then is where you start to lump in like the scientific aspect of this way of working. And then you have the prioritization aspect, which is like, how do you even know what to work on first and why? The create phase, which is in the middle. So that is like the thing that holds the whole process together, where design, content, development come together to take an idea from concept the whole way into execution and then through to analysis. So you see it's kind of broken up into 3 separate parts. And at the end of it, you have the testing phase, which is typically just like I advocate mainly for A/B tests, not for multivariate tests or ABN tests. And then you have the analyze phase, where data scientists can really shine, but I try to decode some of the mysteriousness behind how statistics work in the book as well. And then you have the decision phase, where everybody comes together again. And then the output of everybody, every team member on your team going through these processes together is you create collective knowledge, which then gets reinforced back into the system, making it stronger. So it's really about how do you work together with every craft on your product team and lean on one another's strengths in each one of these phases. So there's not, I don't advocate for like clear handoffs, like you do this, then I only come in the middle of the phase. I think everybody, developers should be involved in like the discovery and understand phase. They should help prioritize. The craft people should be, the data scientist people should be in the prioritization. Everybody should be a part of the whole process to really make it strong and to help everybody learn. That's a basic overview of the process in the book.
Amazing. And then each one of those steps is described in a whole chapter with the method and the templates at the end of the book. So it's a very actionable book, which I really like. I was looking into things that can be actionable, and sometimes when you look into that, or you follow it to the T sometimes, but then you adjust it to how it works for your organization and things like that. Now, it's not a short process. It takes time, and there is a lot of steps in there, of course. And one of the things that come to my mind is really about the relationship between this process and the overall product, process, or I don't want to call it product process because there isn't one specific product process, right? But in general, there is maybe the levels of when do we apply those steps, and maybe sometimes it's about some of the steps, sometimes it's about all the steps. And when I'm saying when, I mean like in the level, I mean how much do we know? How much strategy are we building right now versus actual, features, or going down into the weeds of applying the product to the strategy, or building the product based on our strategy, right? So where do you see that relationship? Is it like, does the process cover any level, or does the process goes only when we have something already defined as a vision and a strategy, etc.?
The process covers all of the levels, because it's really about introducing the scientific method into how your teams are working. And it's also about pivoting or changing direction when presented with new information. One of the things that infuriates me most about most product processes is that they often have roadmaps where they plan out, a year in advance, months in advance, what it is everybody's going to be working on based on how many months of research and planning. You've done all of this, but it's a really big bet, right? And most of the time, I have never, ever once in my entire life seen a product roadmap, fit within the allotted time, use the allocated resources. It's always like a crapshoot, in my opinion. And then you spend all that time and effort planning things when you could be spending that time and effort actually learning things and testing and validating based on immediate user feedback, and then using that to refine your product and strategy, your business strategy and vision. So it's a bit of push and pull, where it's like, yes, you have to start with having some kind of high level vision and setting North Star metrics. So you have to have some of your business fundamentals put in place first. But then you're basically like making an assumption. Your first product plan ever is typically an assumption based on very little actual evidence, right?
Yeah.
So from that point forward, it's about going through the process quickly in an agile way, as many times as possible, to learn as much as possible, and then refining your strategy based on what you learn from your experiments. And ideally, even if you do have, let's say, like a new feature you want to release, or if you want to pivot your business to go in an entirely different direction, I would always say, what is the smallest step experiment that you can run, even if it's not your classical, typical A/B test in a special tool? What is the way that you can get the highest quality evidence to know that that is actually a direction that you should be going in? And that fits into the same kind of process.
Yeah. Okay, so the roadmap can serve as the guiding light and the rails that you stay within, but like you have to remain flexible along the way. I think that's a key of it.
Yeah, I was also going to say, like, imagine you have a really great roadmap, like product roadmap, and let's say you're shipping a brand new feature, and then you have like 3 other features that you're getting ready to line up to release later, or bug fixes, blah, blah, blah. If you find out that that feature that you just released was amazing and it had a massive impact on the business, why would you immediately move on to releasing a new feature when there's probably so much value left on the table that you should really be digging? Like when you find gold, I always say, keep digging. Don't move on to the next thing just because it's on your roadmap. Like,
that's great.
Say you found something that actually matters to customers, and that is actually so hard to do. So why would you not just keep digging when you find the gold and extract all the value because it's much easier to make more value on top of value that you've already found than go find a whole new gold mine to dig it. Just lean on the labor you've already put into it,
Yep. And that's the focus on outcomes over output. We hear that a lot these days. Like focus on the outcome, deliver the value. Don't just ship outputs of I need to have X, Y, and Z done this year.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because again, what is the value of X, Y, and Z? Maybe X is the only thing that's going to bring you any value. So you need to maybe test both, like all 3 of those things at the same time in the smallest possible way to know which one you should actually pursue with meaningful effort. But I know it's a bit of a different way of thinking about product and business. But yeah, I think that's also what made Booking.com so different than other businesses, is that things were not planned. We followed our customers. We listened to what they said, and when we found the gold, we just kept digging. So,
yeah, and I think throughout the process, you also emphasize about honesty and be true to yourself, and really making decision based on, it's not just based on data. This is, already a cliche. I like use data too. I mean, we know that we need data, but it's really about not listening to our ego, but listening to the reality. And so that's also very refreshing sometimes, because we know how many people are really listening to themselves only.
Yeah, and we forget. I think this is also where, again, my bit of a weird perspective comes in, because I worked years upon years in service roles. So I very much see the act of creating things for people, design, working in any kind of business is fundamentally customer service, right? So I have a really hard time detaching what it is that I'm working on from knowing that there are people on the other side of the screen. So I always try to remember, hey, what we're working on actually impacts real people in a way that will mean they'll either walk up to the cash register till and pay us money or not. And they'll either come back through those doors again or not. So I, like you said, it's really about, using your judgment and not forgetting that we're there to serve people, not just to deliver on a plan, and really empathizing with them and seeking to meet their needs in a way that actually fuels the business.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I also really, I mean, I learned a lot from the book, but one of the things that resonated with me was the test like you're wrong
Yeah.
in the test phase. Because many times when we write hypotheses and we come up to test things, we want to prove ourselves right.
Yep.
And this is really the opposite. Can you talk about this a bit? Because this really kind of like, okay, that makes so much sense. And I really should train myself to think like that more in the future. Because I admit that I also many times always wanted to prove that our ideas are right.
Yeah. So this is again another thing stolen from science, the idea of design like you're right, test like you're wrong. And it's at the heart of it is something called null hypothesis testing. And a lot of us actually learn in science class when we're much younger what a hypothesis is, but we learn like the grossly dumbed down version of what it is to be a scientist. And actually what we were taught in schools most of the time is a hypothesis is actually a prediction, right? But what the hypothesis is, the null hypothesis is just basically saying you are going to stick with the default position, right? So you'll all stick with that unless you are given evidence that is strong enough to sway you to accept the new variant as the new default position. So that's a very scientific way of saying it. It's saying I'm going to stick with what I know unless I'm given strong enough evidence to sway me to something else. Whereas, like you said, in most businesses, we think we know what's better, and we're not really looking for evidence to, sway us from our default position. We're looking for evidence to prove ourselves correct, if that makes any sense. So it is very much a mindset shift to say, like, yes, I think this will be better, but I am psychologically going to be stubborn and say I'm only going to turn this on or roll this out if I get evidence that is this strong that says, which is so much that says I should roll it out. But I think why people don't do that is because it's really, really hard. It's so hard. Most of what we work on is absolutely worthless, and even more of it, a decent amount of it is actually worse. It's making things actively worse. So we can spend a lot of time and work on stuff, and then we can actually be losing money and making the experience worse. And I think when you take a null hypothesis mindset and test like you're wrong, then you start to learn something, and then you're actually making things better.
Yeah, it's still a bit counterintuitive, even though it makes so much sense. When you read it, when you say it, it really makes a lot of sense. But it's counterintuitive to the way we're wired, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of the things, that's one of the things that I love about experimentation and seeing how a business has thrived with this type of mindset is a lot of the common wisdom is actually wrong. And a lot of the things that make businesses succeed is actually highly counterintuitive. So one of the things that I hear people say a lot is, why would we test that? It's going to take so much longer. We have to move faster than that. But you actually have to slow down and be more methodical to make real progress faster. So what we think is the right way to go, or what is often common wisdom, I have found turns out to be false in many circumstances.
Yeah. And this is cognitive bias. So you're being very subjective when it comes to this. And I think that's maybe a human instinct in terms of if I just keep going the way I'm going or the way I want to go, everything's going to be stable, and I'm not going to just destabilize my environment if I just do what I want. If somebody introduces new information, then now I got to go do all this other stuff, and I was
Yeah.
wrong, and there's a lot of insecurities in that, right?
Yeah, you really have it's taking a scientific mindset, again, just falling in love with the problem that you're trying to solve and going towards the goal versus your ego. It is a huge mindset shift.
Yeah.
I think it worked for me because I have horrible self-worth and terrible confidence in myself. So it's like I went into it being like an art school student and thrown into a tech environment. So I was like, I don't know anything. Everything I do is wrong. Please help me make sure I don't screw this up so bad, But it ended up being a really helpful mindset to just assume that I'm always wrong and that I'm bad and I'm going to screw up in some way. So
That's so interesting. That is really interesting. So yeah, maybe next time I hear someone saying something like that about themselves, I will tell them that's actually not too bad that you're thinking that
Right.
way. So my main every time that we meet with people that worked for companies like that have a very successful way to build business and have people like you coming out of those organizations and teaching the world about how to do that. But then no one listen and they still do the old way and they still, how do you, first of all, what do you tell them? Well, I don't know if there is anything you can tell them really. Like it's a cultural thing and it's changing the mindset. But let's say someone from within those organizations want to start somewhere. They want to start making a change within the organization. And many product managers deal with that because we all read Marty Kagan and we all read about empowering the teams. And then we have very interesting stakeholders that we have to deal with. So what do you tell them? How do you start it? Or
well,
where do you start?
yeah, so I was just lucky that I was kind of plopped into a culture that already thrived on my natural way of operating. So I got really lucky in that respect. I have worked at other places where I was not so lucky in that respect, where very clearly top down, waterfall, lots of roadmaps and lots of planning and lots of getting sign offs on things and that kind of stuff. And that just, it makes my face bleed, like my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my ears, just, it is so not normal for me. So I would be lying if I said I knew exactly how to do it. So I think it's really about testing to see who would respond well to it, because I do think that there are certain character traits that people need to have to be open to it. Like I think openness to new opportunity, low ego, those are kinds of things, characteristics that you need to have in the environment for people to be open to that way of working. And like a low power distance as well too, like a flatter hierarchy is also something that's really useful. So I think it really oftentimes can come from like the bottom up, but it also needs to come from top down too. So it needs to go from both directions.
Yeah.
Because if you try to make change in an organization that has like a CEO, chief business officer person, CTO, somebody that has no desire for people to work that way, because it does take bravery. It takes a certain amount of courage to allow your teams to put their hands on the wheel and to take your hands off of the wheel. That if you try to do that, they'll oftentimes just grasp on even harder, So I think maybe talk to your main stakeholders, see if the C-suite is open to that way of working. Because if they're not, then you're just going to be fighting against the current the entire time, just going to burn yourself out.
Yeah.
This is what we talk about with empowerment, empower teams, Moshe. Having leaders that empower your teams to make decisions and discover things. Leadership says, I don't know the answer to this.
Yes.
I'm empowering you all to go figure it out. And then everybody in the team says, yeah, I am a product manager. I'm a designer. I'm an engineer. But you know what? I don't know this either. So let's all discover and experiment together.
Yeah.
And come up with the best solution.
But like I said, it takes bravery. We have so many scared leaders. Like anytime I see somebody grasping for power and holding on to it and telling people what to do, that tells me that they don't actually know how to be a leader. They know how to be authoritative, but they don't know how to inspire people to achieve greatness and to set a goal and motivate people towards that goal. And that tells me that they're fundamentally, I think, somewhat unqualified.
Yeah.
But it also tells me that they don't trust their team, which would tell me, did you not hire a good team? You know, if you're hiring these people and then you don't trust them, then maybe they were hiring for as cheap of labor as possible, in which case maybe they were setting up their business to operate that way. But I guess that's their decision to make.
Yeah, but the way you started answering it actually really triggers something for me. It triggered in a good way. Uh, you said testing to see who will respond well to it, because at the end we came up to the conclusion that if you have a bad person at the top, then there is not much you can do about it. But testing to see who will respond to it is almost like applying this process to this problem, and that's where we, as product managers, we always say that everything is a product and you can apply different product methodologies to it. So if here the product is creating value in the organization by applying a working process that will really create value for the organization, then how can we experiment there? What is the hypothesis, and what are the different things we can try within the organization using the same process that you're describing in the book for this type of success? What do you think about it?
No, I completely agree with you. To figure out what are the levers that you can press within the organization, or what kind of buy-in can you get? And sometimes I'm also an advocate for not only testing to see who responds well to certain ideas, but I'm also an advocate for just doing it and don't ask for permission, just do it. And then, see what their response is. So nobody's ever going to say, oh yes, of course you can do that. Of course I want to, give you this A/B testing tool. I want to invest in this. But if you do it and then you have the outcomes, then people are more likely to, I think, invest in it. Because oftentimes, actually, I think a lot of people don't even know what good looks like. And they don't understand it fundamentally. It's so much over people's heads that they don't even know what they would be signing up for.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of education in it as well, too.
Yeah. And it's harder to argue against data as well. So if you go off and you do these tests and experiments, come back with a result and say, hey, where we were going is not where we need to go based upon the data I have, the person's going to be okay.
I have actually seen executives before say, I don't believe that result. It looks too good to be true. Like they assume that you have to work they have to put a certain amount of effort in to get a certain amount of ROI back. And I was like, no, actually making a lot of money and solving customer problems doesn't have to be a multi-month endeavor. You could just make a 5-minute fix or invest cents on the dollar and have an incredible ROI. So I have seen people say no.
Just ignore it and keep moving.
They don't understand how statistics works. And I'm just like, how did you get to be an executive? You have a data scientist coming to you and telling you they have a significant result, and then you just saying, what? I don't believe it.
That's just magic. I can't believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't believe it. Let's just move on. Like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, in some cases, the bottom line is that after a while, we just have to quit that job and look for something else. And I've heard this in the beginning. I thought it was only my problem that I had to do that. But then when I heard it again and again and again from other people that I really admire, I'm like, probably I just follow the same trend as other people. But I think that knowing what to experiment with within the context of your organization is also really important, because you might have smaller things that you could do that we kind of go under the radar and you don't need to ask permission for, because either you have the permission or it doesn't cost that much or whatever it is. And then once you show these small wins, then you can grow them more and more. So don't start big or anything like that. Just and I've done it actually many times before, either without even knowing I was doing it. But one time I remember my boss came to me to a meeting and he said, I came to this meeting with the intention to refuse your request. And after everything I showed him in the meeting, he said, you did everything. You showed me the reason for it. You gave me the data. I'm approving this.
Oh,
So,
good.
yeah, so things are possible as long as you take the initiative also to think, how can you make that within your constraints in the organization.
Yeah, for sure. And like you
Mhm.
said, it doesn't always have to be big. It can be
Mhm.
small, but
Mhm.
have a large impact as well. So
Yeah,
lower the risk for them,
yeah, amazing. Now, I think there was another thing in the book that resonated. Well, there is a lot of things that resonated with me, but maybe one question that I wanted to ask you, because there is a lot of frameworks out there, and even just how to write an hypothesis and how to prioritize and things like that. There is tons of people that talked about that and wrote this and stuff like that. When you researched for the book or put it together, was it all based on booking.com, or was it based on additional things that you added to that, or how did you build the entire process?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of I've attended tons of conferences. I think one of the benefits of being a conference speaker is that I get to hear like hundreds of talks, and I love reading. So I've read a whole bunch of different books. And so I've had a lot of conversations about prioritization methods, and I've had a lot of conversations about I don't know, yeah, different development or rollout processes, that kind of stuff. And when it came down to it, I realized that a lot of time, again, just because you do something that's fancy doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually better. And I found over time that the most effective way of actually staying focused on work and delivering a lot was basically by having sticky notes on my monitor. And then I found out that that's actually a really good way of working, which is just Kanban, And I think we have the humans, we like to make things more complex than they are, or we like to iterate on it so much that it turns into a beast that it's taken on a life of its own. But again, like a simple tool, proven over years, having Kanban, there's only so many things you can work on at a given time and point, and seeing everything in one place. So I really like sticky notes on a board. And I know we have like the different types of prioritization frameworks, like what is it, like ICE, what is your expected impact? What is the amount of effort that it's gonna take, all that kind of stuff, and how many customers does it impact? All that's just guessing. It's just fancy ways of guessing. And a lot of times it's performative. And I would always say, instead of taking the time to do performative prioritization, just if you have an idea, test it. Like, how can you shorten the length of time from having an idea, seeing a problem and solving it in the least amount of effort possible? Then it's not really about prioritization and having a backlog, because when you have a backlog, you're inherently wasting more time managing the backlog, figuring out who can work on what and coordinating things. It adds more complexity, but it looks like it's easier and simpler, that you're doing something to make things go smoother, when in actuality, you're adding more time between the idea and the execution. So I'm trying to say, how can you shorten that as much as possible?
Yeah. So really testing is continuum. You test all the time, new ideas that are coming in, new things that new
Yeah.
hypotheses. So it's not like a period of time, it's an ongoing.
Always, yeah. And like one of the things that I have, another kind of framework that I have in the book, again, it's really simple. It's like 60-40 framework, where I say 60% of your time should be spent on like low effort sort of experiments, right? If you have an idea and it's pretty low effort, just do it. Don't put it into a backlog, assess it later, and then run data. Just do it, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other 40% should be dedicated to more like your long-term strategic, sort of more difficult feature releases that take more time. So those are the bigger bets, right? So you always want to have like short-term gains compared against your long-term strategic stuff. That way you're never putting too many eggs in one basket. So when I was working at Booking, and I still do it to this day as well too, I say, every week I want to do something, just get something small and easy out the door at 2, 3, 4 things, and then I'll work the rest of my time on the longer term thing that might take me a couple of weeks. So yeah.
And if we're speaking with an agile team that has, let's say, 5, 6 or developers and a couple of other people on the team, you would say the same thing to that level?
Yep, absolutely. And if you have them, let's say if you give them a problem statement, right? And this is also kind of different where it's usually you say, here, release XYZ feature, or we need to make such an XYZ amount of money by the end of the quarter or whatever. But I think it's better to work with problem statements that you think have a lot of value in solving, right? If you know that, like, let's say you have top 10 customer problems list that people call customer service for, and you know that it's hemorrhaging XYZ amount of money in terms of like customer service fees that you're paying to your agents or whatever. So you would then say, okay, how do you solve the top 2 problems on our highest volume reasons that people call the customer service line? And then you just let those teams go at it, or let a team go at it, and then they'll eventually figure it out. And then you'll know that it's tied to some sort of really important revenue metric as well as a customer experience metric, because that means they're getting an answer to a question, or they're avoiding a problem that would have led them to eventually calling customer service. So I would say, give your teams a problem to solve, give them a success metric that you would expect to be impacted when they've actually solved it, and then just let them figure it out. Let them do the work.
And then have the bandwidth to actually implement it and discover, build, learn, and develop, and not say we have to have this deliverable by like Q2, Q3 and such.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because
that's exactly
maybe
what empowerment means. And it's so counterintuitive for managers, and it's so hard for managers.
Yeah. And what else is really interesting too is like, you can have big ideas and small ideas and easy ideas and hard ideas. And like, if you said, okay, here's the top customer problem that people call the service line for, how would you solve that? Somebody might say, oh, I really just want to put a line of copy there that says, don't do this. That takes 5 minutes to do, or maybe waiting for translations. So before your team finds the more convoluted or more difficult ways of solving that problem, why not just put that line of content there and then run that, and then say, okay, now if we were going to attack this from a more thoughtful way and dig more into the data, then what would it be? And you'll be surprised how many instinctual, well, I just want to tell them this at that point, actually works over the more complicated, let's dive into the data and go through this whole rigmarole. A lot of, I think, design and product development tends to be performative versus like actually just trying to make things better for people as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And we've all learned humans like to complicate things. So, as soon as you start to think about a solution, humans start to say, oh, well, I would make this complicated system that only I understand. And it's just like, again, I think that's probably human nature to overcomplicate. So keep it simple, stupid. So that's a good way to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. What's the smallest step that you can take to solve the problem as quickly as possible? Just do that. Do that first, and then think about it some more.
Yeah. Excellent.
Is there a tool, an actual product that you would recommend people that, your go-to that everyone needs to know about?
Okay, so I'm highly biased because I'm an advisor for a company called ABsmartly, and it's actually owned by Jonas Alves. He's the founder of the company, and he was the genius that built the A/B testing platform, or the experimentation tool at Booking.com. It is light years beyond any other tool that I've ever seen, which is why I'm like, yes, I was just delighted when he asked me to like be on his advisory team, because I was like, it is life-changing. The data visualizations are so much simpler. It has like automatic SRM checks. The documentation stuff is way easier than a lot of the other tools I've seen on the market. So I would suggest ABsmartly, but it's more for like mid-sized businesses to larger sized businesses. So it's not like a good replacement for Google Optimize, or so it's just a little bit more expensive, but it is also really awesome.
Amazing. We did have a series about A/B testing tools. That was a while ago.
We had A/B testy. Tasty.
Yeah,
Oh, A/B tasty. A/B tasty. Yeah, people. Yeah.
I just looked at but that's great. ABsmartly. That's great.
ABsmartly is great. Yeah, they're really great.
Amazing. So it's always good to learn about the new product in the market.
Absolutely.
Matt, do you have any other questions?
No, that was going to be it. Yeah, I was going to ask about what's your favorite tool of choice. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's perfect. Yeah, I think this has been super helpful. I love talking about these topics. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Aaron.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so glad that we finally got to
Yes.
make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where can people reach out to you?
Well, I am usually just being a gremlin in my office somewhere in Amsterdam, but you can also find me trolling around on LinkedIn,
Okay.
writing sassy comments in people's threads. Or I also have my own website called erindoesthings.com. And one of the things I do is experimentation and product design and that kind of stuff. So erindoesthings.com or
Amazing.
trolling on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you
That's
so
great.
much.
Thank you,
Great.
Aaron, so much. Thank you, Moshe. As always, it's great. Thank you to all the listeners, and we'll talk to everybody next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.